Hello, and welcome to this very short video on the complete set of K-12 progression matrix of elements for the 3 dimensions of the Arizona Science Standards. This new implementation guidance document was developed in collaboration with the Arizona Department of Education and the Arizona Science Teachers Association. Let's begin by discussing where to find these elements on our website. Well, if you go to the main ADE Science Standards website, you scroll down to where it says vertical progressions, and you click this menu. This is what you will see. This new document is right here in the very first bullet point. So let's go there right now. Here is the Science Standards website. And as we scroll down, click vertical progressions. Here is the document we're going to discuss today. But I also want to take a moment to just point out that we already have the Science and Engineering Practices progression matrix of elements, and we already had the cross-cutting concepts matrix of elements as well. What we did not have until right now were the elements for the third dimension, or the core ideas, which is now housed in this document. We do still have the vertical progression of the core ideas, but this document does not have the elements. This is the document we're going to discuss today. Here is the main page. Let's scroll down to page 2. On page 2, you see a table of contents with an introduction and a purpose. Let's take a look real quick to make sure everyone understands what elements are. Elements, as you'll see throughout this document, will be noted as these bullet points. And they are specific pieces of knowledge and skill that make up either the core idea, the cross-cutting concepts, or the science and engineering practice at that grade band. So they're very essential for planning and teaching three-dimensional instruction. Come on down to page 3. This is very important. It explains how to use and read this document, specifically calling attention to some definitions that are important to note. If you see the word boundary throughout this document, that's a statement that provides guidance about the scope of the standard at a particular grade level. We also provided clarification statements, which are statements that provide examples or additional clarification for the standard. If you see a note sprinkled throughout the document, those notes are statements that describe any additional resources or instructional guidance you may need. There is also some codings, as you can see. Here is an example of an element for the core idea that correlates to this standard. Underneath, you'll see the bullet, and this is what we call the element. And then underneath, you'll see codings. These codings are in parentheses throughout the document, and they indicate that there is a connected standard or standards which uses the same element as described right here. We also clarified some language on what do we mean by engineering technology and the application of science, and this video will be right here housed inside this document for easy viewing. Also, thank you to everyone who worked on this document. Here is the list of the credits. And as we continue, here is the new elements for the core ideas per grade band. And you can see, here's an example of a note, here's an example of a boundary, and those will be sprinkled throughout for further clarification. So let's come on back to the presentation. Oh, one more important thing to note is that all 3 dimensions are actually in here now. We do have the cross-cutting concepts matrix of elements at the end, the science and engineering matrix of elements, and now we have the core ideas of knowing and using science, all in this one document. That's why we call it the complete set. So let's return to the presentation. And when we talk about why is this new document related to the core idea elements so important? Well, because when we go to unpack the 3 dimensions of our Arizona Science Standards, we need to unpack the science and engineering practices using the elements. We unpack the elements for the cross-cutting concepts. Now we have the tool to unpack the core ideas of knowing and using science. And so to close out, let's just spend a brief moment to talk about how do we actually use these documents? Well, the elements are intended to be used for the following things. The first is unpacking the 3 dimensions in a standard. Second, you need these documents to plan for instruction. Those elements can be used as objectives and or for differentiation to look up a grade band or go below. And it's very important that we integrate the elements of all 3 dimensions. One thing to note is that this is not a list of items to be checked off. Here is an example of unpacking a 6th grade standard. You can see for each of the 3 dimensions, the bullet points are elements that pertain to that science and engineering practice, the core idea, this is L2, U3, and the cross-cutting concepts are all embedded here. And this is the intention of this document, to pull out these elements for the 3 dimensions to plan for instruction. So thank you very much. I hope you find this document and this video very helpful.